BARCBOYS channel. My name is Dave Nicholas, and I'll be your host. This channel is all about sports car racing in the 1950s and 1960s, that golden era of road racing that changed the face of it forever. We will bring you thousands of photos of these great cars and drivers and tracks. We were there back in the day, shot photos and wrote stories, and now we want to bring them to you. It all started with 4 teenagers in Binghamton, New York in 1958. It amazed each of us to find another young guy who actually knew what an MG or a Jag or Ferrari even was. The bond was immediate, and it lasts to this day. We started going to races and reading everything our eyes could gobble up in the early 50s. We watched a young driver named Penske make his name. We watched Sterling Moss, the master, who simply made everyone else look average, and we hated the Rodriguez brothers because they were fast and they were racing and we weren't. We went from Sebring in Florida to Mosport in Canada and every track in between. We took trains or buses or scrounged rides and later got our own cars. We had no money. If we were lucky, somebody let us stay in their hotel room, or we found a flea-bag flop house. But more often, we camped or slept on the ground or in our cars. Only at Watkins Glen, we stayed in the basement of local folks' homes who opened up rooms for race fans. We are passionate about the sport, and boy did we get lucky. Upstate New York had Watkins Glen just 60 miles away, and there were hundreds of motorheads. But by far, the biggest boost to us was meeting Spanky Smith. His full name was Edmund Smith, but nobody knew him by that name. A combat-wounded World War II vet, Spanky returned home to Endicott, New York with a love of performance cars and racing. Spanky not only took us to races, but introduced us to a dozen national champ drivers. Bob Bucher and Sherm Decker both lived close by. Spanky knew everybody. From his early start with SCCA racing, he formed fast friendships with the elite of motor racing, and he dragged us along with him. Spanky's Winnebago was the first motor home in the paddock, and when I say everybody was there, I mean everybody. For years, it was the de facto McLaren team's home away from home.
Those are some magical days for the BARCBOYS, but life caught up. We started racing ourselves, we went into the Army, we got married, we split for other parts of the world. But the spirit never left the BARCBOYS. A few years ago, Ben Sissel from the SVRA found out we'd been to Sebring way back in 1960 and were still racing in 2020. Here's the story he told about our adventures.
Hi, my name's Dave Nicholas, and I'm the driver of the Honeybee, a 1960 MGA. And I'm here at Sebring, and I've got to tell you, this is just such a magical place. I first came to Sebring in 1959. I've got to qualify that because I never made it. I was in high school, and I met a bunch of guys that raced in SCCA. I wrote them a letter, and they said, Dave, if you can make it to Sebring, you can stay with us, you can be on the pit crew. And I'll tell you, for a 17-year-old kid, that was like a gift from God. But my parents wouldn't let me go. I lived in upstate New York, and they said, son, you're crazy. You are not going to Florida. What I did is I took my paper route money out of the savings bank, bought a bus ticket, and ran away from home, left high school, and went to Sebring. The problem is I thought I could get all the way there and back on $30. You know, what does a 17-year-old know? So instead, I ran out of money, and I stopped in Richmond, Virginia, and I went to Western Union. And I had Western Union talk to the bank where my little savings account was, and to have them send me $30 more. Well, my father, being the smart guy, alerted the bank and said, if you hear from this maniac, call me. They called him, he called the police, and I remember sitting on the curb outside the Western Union office, and a police car came up and said, are you Dave? I said, yeah, how did you know that? They said, get in the car, son. They picked me up, put me on a bus, and sent me back. But that's not the end of the story. A friend of mine named Steve Vail was really upset because I ran away from home and went to Sebring and didn't include him. He said, we're going. So I was the hero of the high school, right? Hey, big guy, runs off to Florida. Steve Hale then went to his grandmother's house, stole her Chrysler Imperial, picked me up at midnight, and we took off again for Sebring. We got picked up for speeding about 100 miles an hour in Southern Virginia. They threw us in jail, and that's the end of the story. We did get to Sebring in 1960. We've been there ever since, and that's why it's a very special place. I'm telling you, Sebring has all the ghosts of all the great races ever, and I'm just pleased to be here. In 1958, a bunch of young guys that love sports car racing decided we were going to start a club. Well, we wanted to join the British Automobile Racing Club, but they were being very British. They said, oh no, this is strictly a British club for British drivers. Well, we lived in a city called Binghamton, New York. So we said, to heck with this. We started the Binghamton Automobile Racing Club. So there are two BARCs, one the very proper British Automobile Racing Club, and then there was us in 1958, 4 kids still in high school, but we knew car racing. We would beg, borrow, or steal. We would take trains. We would hitchhike. We would go to Watkins Glen. We would go to Marlboro and Lime Rock and Montgomery. We would go to all these courses. And 2 of us were photographers for the high school newspaper. So what we would do is we would just simply check out the cameras from the high school, take pictures, take them back to the high school the next week and develop them. So we did all our own stuff. We would show up the next week at a race and say, hey, Billy, here's a picture of your TR3. Give me $5. And we used to sell them for $2 or $3. But you must remember, in 1959 or 1960, gasoline was 25 cents a gallon. So we ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and went to the races, and we got to know everybody. And that's BARC Boys continued on even to this day. Graham Hill was actually a member of BARC Boys. We had a lot of great race drivers, and there's still a few of us alive today, and we're upholding the honor of BARC Boys, and we still drink a lot of beer and race cars.
How do they go to the website?
If you want to go and see what we've got, lots of photos from the 50s and 60s, is BARCBOYS, BARCBOYS.com.
Well, that's it for the first BARC Boys channel video. I hope you liked it. If you like racing history from those days, take a look at our website, BARCBOYS.com. Thousands of photos of races and drivers from tracks all over the world. Send us an email, and I'll put you on our BARC Boys update, so when we add another story, you'll know. Next up for the channel is a story from 1958 about Lance Reventlo's legendary Scarabs, coming east to face the vaunted Briggs Cunningham Lister Jags in a place called Montgomery. No, not Alabama, but Montgomery, New York. Until then, keep the shiny side up.